Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Outside Shore Music, home of mastering MuseScore, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is, for those of you who are new, my regular series. We talk about some aspect of using MuseScore, making music with MuseScore, and now I get to say with MuseScore Studio. So this is what we're going to be talking about today is the latest update to the MuseScore program. And yeah, we'll talk about the different aspects of what is MuseScore, but MuseScore Studio is what we are looking at here. It's the notation software that previously was just called MuseScore. Now it's going to be called MuseScore Studio, just to give it a name, kind of distinct from MuseScore, which also could refer to the website, could refer to the mobile apps, etc. So now we just have a way of differentiating it. This is still going to be called the MuseScore Café because, broadly speaking, we're talking about all aspects of MuseScore here. So, the first thing, so I talked a little bit about the naming. Let me just talk a little bit more about that, and then I'll show you how I think you should be able to go about getting it. But it's going to be different for different systems. So the naming, there is no real change to the software itself. It's just renamed. But what should be the case, and I verified this on Windows, if you go to Help, Check for Update within MuseScore, it'll pop up a dialog that'll either say you're up to date or it'll say there's an update available. Now, if what happens is they make the update available, but they don't necessarily turn on automatic updates right away. They usually wait for the server load to go down, right? So the first bunch of people are going to go to the website and download it directly, and so they don't turn on automatic updates until then. So you might find Help, Check for Update finds it for you. You might find just closing MuseScore and reopening it will pop up the, hey, there's an update available. That's what happened for me on Windows when I went to do it this morning. On Linux, you can always get updates this way. You would type, assuming that you downloaded the app image and installed it normally, you would type, you download the app image from the website and then run it with the install option. You would type MuseScore for update and hit enter, and it will look for updates and automatically download and install any updates. If none of those are working for you, here is what should work. Let me go over to MuseScore.org. So if you have MuseHub installed within MuseHub, like let me open up the Linux version of MuseHub, which is called Muse Sounds Manager. It's called this on Linux because it doesn't actually update MuseScore for you, but I'll show you how you would do it because it's going to look very much like MuseHub on other systems. So if you click this gear icon in MuseHub, it'll pop up a dialog, and here you'll see where it says updates. There's a little arrow next to it, and that will check for updates and upload them if there's any that it thinks are available. Again, if they haven't flipped the switch to actually make that happen, come over to MuseScore.org. Let me make sure I'm seeing the chat. There we go. Here on the main page of MuseScore.org, you'll see, oh my gosh, there used to be links right here that would say download without MuseHub. So we're not going to do that. Those buttons are apparently not there. So we're going to, they must have updated the site yesterday. So I'm going to go to download and then software. And here you will see MuseScore Studio 64-bit without MuseHub, or for Mac, MuseScore Studio without MuseHub. So this page here, the download software page, if you aren't getting it by check for updates, oh, that's interesting, D colon apparently is an emoji. So if you're not getting it by the check for updates within MuseScore and MuseHub isn't showing it to you, this page will let you download it bypassing MuseHub. So that will be your way to do this. All right, so that's how you're going to go about getting it. And then once you've installed it, it's installed, and it's just a complete replay. I mean, it's not a new program; it's just a renaming of MuseScore. However, I say it's not a new program, but it is a new version, right? So this is 4.3. They're keeping the numbering constant, so it's not like starting over at MuseScore Studio 1. It's just a renaming. So this is MuseScore 4.3, or MuseScore Studio 4.3. It's going to be forever before I start saying that correctly. And I've written up myself a little list of some of the things that we're going to talk about. In fact, what's the best way for me to do this? I'm just going to quickly type this list. We're going to talk about sound flags, tempo, which I showed off, a week or two ago, but didn't really know what I was doing. Reset entire score, style settings, MusicXML, bug fixes, and version number of score. These are the main things that we're going to talk about here. And I'm just putting them in the chat so that you all can refer to them. And if I don't get around to something and you're like, oh, you're running out of time, could you jump ahead to this? So sound flags is the big one. Therefore, I'm not going to start with it because it's the one that might take the most time to explain. I want to talk about some of the things that I can talk about quickly first, and then we'll spend some time on that. But I also want to show some new things about the mobile app, like the iPad and Android app, at least the iPad version that I have. I'll show you some new things there, like it finally supports MuseScore 4 scores as of a few days ago. And a couple cool things about MuseScore.com that, including one that Dave, are you here? There's now a version history available on MuseScore.com. Who knew? All right, so let's talk about some of the quick things that I can show you here. The first thing I want to show you is a couple new style settings. This is not a huge update, I'm going to say. There's not a lot of stuff. The sound flags are the big one. Other than that, it's mostly little things, right? But the sound flags is a big deal. So that's why I want to wait until I'm have gotten some of this easy stuff out of the way, and then we'll dig into the sound flags a little more. So the format style dialog has a couple of new things in it now. And they're not big, but you want to know about them because things have moved around a little bit. There used to be settings here on the page, format style page. On this section here, there used to be settings that controlled various aspects of clefs and key signatures and time signatures, whether they would appear on at all, no, whether they would appear on all systems and so forth. And that made this section way too complicated and bigger than it needed to be. And there was no reason for it to be here. So they now have their own section here, clefs, key, and time signatures. And these are mostly the same settings that existed before, whether or not you're going to show clefs on every system or if you're going to only show them on the first system. You might wonder, well, why would I do that? Well, this is very common in lead sheets to only show a clef on the first system. Very common in lead sheets. It's also very common for tab to only show the tab clef on the first system. So there's options for that. There's a global option to control whether you're going to show courtesy clefs. Like, if there's a clef change at the beginning of a system, should the courtesy clef appear at the end of the last system? If you have a section break between them, they won't show. But and so normally, if you just want to suppress a given clef because it's a new piece or a new section of a piece, you'd use a section break. But this allows you to disable them globally. So all this stuff has been there before. It's just moved to this new section here. What is new is that tab option, the one to only hide tab, only hide tab clefs after the first system. So that's interesting that Firefox is giving you an issue. Interesting. Okay, so that's just a new area for these settings. So if you're looking for them, they've moved, and there's just that new tab setting. Speaking of tablature, if I pop over to the tablature section of the style dialog, which is relatively new. They snuck that in there some point when I wasn't paying attention, to be honest. I didn't even know this section was here for a while. But so this section has been here for a little bit, and it allows you to control which types of elements appear on tablature staves. So those of you who are writing either for like rock bands for guitar, where you're using tablature, or Renaissance music, where you're writing lute tablature, or other types of instrument, viola da gamba and things like that, that use tablature, this lets you control which types of markings will appear on that tablature staff. Because, you know, in MuseScore, you can have a standard and a tablature staff linked together so that everything you enter on the tab staff appears on the standard staff and vice versa. But this lets you control, for instance, whether the accents and marcato marks appear on the tab staff or not. Because sometimes you want the tab staff to be simpler, just show the numbers, right? So that's what all this stuff is about. So this section has been there for a while, but it's expanded now, and it's got some additional options to control how ties work. Because there's always been a debate about the best way to show ties in tablature, and rather than pick an answer that only makes half the people happy, now there's a bunch of options. So you can have your favorite style of ties in tablature. So that's what's new in the style dialog. So yeah, if people have particular questions about any of that, let me know and I can try to demo something, but I just wanted to just show where those things were. The next thing though that I want to show is something that I started to show last time, but you know, I confused myself. Let's put it that way. I forgot that a tempo really only is meaningful after a gradual tempo change. So what I'm going to do is create a new score for playing around with, and then we'll get to play with some of these ideas. So while I'm setting that up, let me just say also a couple other things. MusicXML, a lot of attention was given. Hello, it's frozen. A lot of attention was given to MusicXML import and export, but mostly import in this version. So there's a lot of improvements having to do with that. So I'm going to add myself a few useful instruments here that I know I'm going to want. I'll add myself a piano, and I will add myself violin. All right, so I've got some instruments here. And so let's talk about some of these things. So one of the things I'm going to do is just fill this score with my favorite little scale fragment. Turn the volume back up. And I'm going to put in a tempo change here. I'm going to put in and let me get back to where I can see the chat. There we go. I'm going to put in, so I've selected this measure. Actually, I'm going to do it 2 measures so you can just see. I'm going to select that range of 2 measures and then come over to the tempo palette and add myself a retardando. And notice it appears above the top system. Let's listen to this now. So it slowed down over those 2 measures, which is what retardando does, and then it stayed slower afterwards, right? So, and James, I'm going to get to your question in a second, and well, we'll try to find out. So it slowed down and then it stays slowed down. Well, the way you would normally tell musicians go back to the original tempo is with a tempo. Well, in your tempo palette, you will now have a marking that says a tempo. So when I click that, and by the way, if you don't see it right away, or if it's hidden behind more, which it might be, then what you want to do is click the ... at the top of the tempo palette and say reset palette. That'll make sure you pick up any of the new additions. You might need to do that if you had previously customized your palette. If you haven't customized your palette, then probably you'll get those automatically. But if you previously customized it, you might have to reset it and then recustomize it. So let's listen to the playback now. Slows down. Then back to the normal, right? So a tempo works. A tempo means go back to the tempo, the previous tempo, the tempo from before the retardando. There's also tempo primo. That means go back to the first tempo. So maybe there've been a whole bunch of different tempo changes, and just like it started allegro, and then it changed to andante, and then there was retardando, and then an a tempo, and then another largo section, and then a presto section. Tempo primo will just go back to whatever the first tempo was. And that's the typical Italian marking that you see. And if you don't like the fact that it says tempo primo, if I put this tempo primo, sometimes you'll see people write just tempo and then a Roman numeral 1. Well, you can do that too, tempo 1. So so that'll have the same effect. And if I play this, it'll also go back to the first tempo. Actually, let's put in a presto here just to make that point. And it goes back to the original tempo, right? So that's what a tempo and tempo primo do. So that is also new for 4.3. All right. I want to talk also while I'm looking at this here, and then we're going to try that MusicXML thing. I want to show you a bug fix. There's always a million bug fixes in any release, and usually they're not that interesting to talk about, but this one is near and dear to me because it has been bugging me for a long time. If I enter a whole note on a staff here, and then on the other staff, you enter a figure like this. So I'm holding a C in my right hand, and then in my left hand I play da 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 dum. You can't literally do that, right? You can't literally hold a C in your right hand and then play it also in your left hand, right? A piano doesn't do that. And so Muse Sounds used to not let you do it. But of course, it's common to write it that way, and pianists know, okay, take your finger off the C, right? I mean, it's not a big deal. We know how to do this. And Muse Sounds used to not get this, but now it will. Right now it actually plays it. Right, it played that C. It in 4.2, in all versions of MuseScore 4 up until now, Muse Sounds would just leave out that C because it would say, sorry, you can't play it, you're holding it in the other hand. And this was a pain in the butt. And I'll show you exactly a real world case of this that in a score that many of you have seen before, and that's my piece Reunion. I do this in Reunion in a place that makes total sense that it should do that, and that's at the very end, right? At the very end of this piece, so I have this long, that long chord that I sustain in my right hand, and the pedal is sustaining it. And while the pedal sustains it, I play that arpeggio there in both hands. And so, yes, these notes play while that note is still sustaining, and I needed it to play back that way, and it didn't until now. So there you go. So that was a bug fix that is extremely welcome. There's one other bug fix that's significant enough that I want to highlight it, and that is, and I can't demonstrate it because I never was able to trigger this bug, but we would get every couple of weeks or so someone would report that they created a score with a bunch of parts and they had done all this formatting and stuff on it. And then one day they opened their score, and in the parts, the hairpins, the crescendos were missing, or the slurs were missing in one of the parts or multiple parts. And we never could figure out why. And I say we, I'm not the one who was really doing much of anything with this other than trying to help people figure it out. But no one was able to figure out what was ever causing it. Randomly, occasionally, you would just lose your crescendos in some of the parts or lose your slurs in some of the parts. And there was a workaround. You'd go reset the part. You'd go to the parts menu, and then you would pick a part and then go to that ... menu and say reset. I can't do it now because I haven't even generated these parts yet, but reset would fix it, but it would also eliminate your custom formatting. So it wasn't a great workaround. Well, someone finally figured out how to reproduce that problem. So we would get reports of missing hairpins and slurs and stuff. Again, like every couple of weeks, someone would report it. And it's a big deal. We hate bugs like that, right? People are losing work. That was never good. And for quite a long time, years actually, there would be these sporadic reports. And someone finally figured out like 2 different things that could cause it, and they are both fixed. So hopefully that doesn't happen anymore. All right, how am I doing for time? Good. So I'm going to try James's thing here because I am quite curious. I'm going to add myself a slur. I mean, not a slur, a trill. Come over to my, I need to add the, no, I'm not going to add a palette. I'm just going to switch to another workspace where I've already added palettes because I'm going to leave. Now I'm going to go to the demo workspace where I can just add palettes left and right, and then you can see how to do it. If you don't have the ornaments palette added already, you're going to click the add palettes button and then find ornaments on the list. And it must be that I did add it already. Here it is, ornaments. I'm going to add a trill. And then I'm going to go to the properties panel and set it to a minor second. So it's a trill with a flat sign on it. And then I'll put a note after it just in case that causes a difference. And now I'm going to export this to MusicXML. File, export. I will pick MusicXML and export, and I'm going to do it in my test folder, and it's just going to be called up here trill. And let's find out. I'm going to import that trill file now, and then we'll know the answer. I have a feeling the answer is no, but you never know. So when I import this MusicXML file, will we get that accidental? I don't even know how MusicXML represents that, to be honest. So I don't know if MusicXML is even capable of that. So no, it didn't get it. So there's your answer. No, it didn't happen. I have no idea if that's a problem with the export or with the import or with MusicXML itself. But if you do, James, let me know. If there's a GitHub issue for it, great. It's being tracked. If there's not, let's make sure we file one. But I'll tell you what is improved about MusicXML. The main improvements have to do with text. MusicXML is very limited. It knows lyrics are a type of text, but it knows dynamics are a special kind of text. But all other kinds of text, rehearsal marks, the text that goes in frames between systems, expression text, staff text, all these different kinds of text you might add in your score, MusicXML just sees them all as the same. It doesn't understand that they're different kinds of things that should be handled differently. So for 4.3, MuseScore will now try to figure out, based on the text itself and where it is in the score, what kind of text it probably is, and turn it into the right thing in MuseScore. It won't necessarily always get it right, but it will make its best guess. And because it's just a guess, we want to be able to turn that off. So if you go to Edit, Preferences, and then under Import, you'll see this option here, infer text type based on content where possible. It looks like that's off by default. If you turn it on, it will attempt to guess what kind of text each of your text. So if you put in something that looks like a tempo marking, it'll recognize, hey, that's a tempo marking or whatever. I think tempo markings, MusicXML does have a special type for, but other types of text, again, don't. And even if the music, just because MusicXML has a tempo style, that doesn't mean every program respects it. And so some programs might have exported tempo markings as just plain text. And this will give it a chance for MuseScore to recognize that it's tempo marking and make it actually be a real tempo marking. There's also support for a format called MEI, which is similar to MusicXML, but designed to be more for like music research purposes. That's my best quick summary of the difference. If anyone else knows more about it, feel free to fill me in here. But MusicXML is more about exchanging between programs. So try to capture details of the representation of the score that different notation programs might need to know about. MEI is more about a format that then you could write a program to process, and it's more about capturing the music than capturing the formatting and so forth. So anyhow, MEI is now supported directly in MuseScore Studio. I think that might have been added at 4.2, but it's also been improved for 4.3. So that's some of the stuff about MusicXML, and that goes through all the list of the things that I wanted to talk about, with one exception that's also MusicXML related. I want to show you something about this file that I just imported. So look at this file here. It looks basically fine, but there's a few things, like when you create a MusicXML file, there's some formatting embedded in that file that might not be appropriate. Once you import it into MuseScore, like if you have a file you created in Sibelius based on its formatting, then you import it into MuseScore, those formattings might not be compatible and you might not like the way it looks. There's also things like, notice that these stems in this first measure are down, as they should be, because those notes are above the middle line of the staff. If I transpose that measure down an octave, notice the stems remain down. Why is that? Well, it's because MusicXML has in it something that says this note should be stem down, rather than saying do the automatic thing with this stem. The MusicXML file specified this note should absolutely be stem down, and MuseScore respects that. But you don't want that. You want it to be automatic, right? So there's all sorts of resets. Resets to the positions of things, resets to the fonts used. There's all sorts of things in that MusicXML file that you might want to say, you know what, I don't want any of that stuff. I want it to look like I just did this from scratch in MuseScore. So if you go to the format menu, there's a new option here that says reset entire score to default layout. It kind of does everything that's in these other resets. There's one just for text style. There's one just for beams. There's one just for shapes and positions. Reset entire score to default layout does all three of those things and some more things besides. So when I click this, it's going to reset. Like you notice the composer, like let me undo that. Notice that, the composer was not there, but it was somewhere weird. But when I said to reset it put the composer into the box where it belongs, right? So there's things like that does. So I'm disappointed to see that it didn't also fix the stem direction issue. So I guess now I know you're going to have to run both reset entire score and reset shapes and positions to fix the stem directions. And that probably should have happened automatically, but it didn't. But now I know. So that's something else to know about with MusicXML import. All right, so now let's get into the sound flags, because that's kind of the marquee feature. And so in the video that I posted for this week's newsletter, I showed an example using violin, and I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to do something using trumpet, so we can see that and some of the other things. So if I enter some notes here, and I'll just enter my same old usual notes. When I play this passage, it's going to sound like it sounds. All right. Oh, these tempo markings. This is the MusicXML version. Let's go back to my regular version because I don't trust the MusicXML file to do right things, and I'm going to get rid of these guys here because I don't want them anymore. So if I play this now, you can play. I think you can play. So that's the default playback, right? And as has been observed many times, the default playback is kind of slurry, right? It's like it's very slurred bowed and it's slow finger motion so that it feels like this kind of sliding between pitches. That's never been a popular feature. The developer says, oh yeah, this is the way I want it for my music that I use the most often. And so he's not wanting to change it, the primary developer of Muse Sounds. But there are now options to control different things. And I showed some of these, but let's look at it a little more detail here. If I type Control T to add some staff text, there is now this icon. Oh, and it came up about from accessibility perspective, how do you get to that icon? To get to that icon, you're going to do this. So first of all, if you can use the mouse, just click on the icon and it pops up a dialog. But if you're doing things by keyboard only, here's going to be the way to do it. Control T for staff text, and then type anything you want, just the letter A, for instance, and then hit escape. So you leave text edit mode, and then Alt left. Right now that staff text is selected, but if I press Alt left, let's try it again. Alt left, there we go. Alt left, and it went to the menu for some reason. I'm not sure why, but then I hit Alt right a couple times, and it did the right thing. So if the staff text is selected, Alt left will go to that sound flag button, and it is now part of the normal navigation. F Alt left goes to the E, to the D, to the A, to the sound flag, to the C, to the time signature, etc. The sound flags are just part of the navigation, and then that pops up the sound flag dialog, and then tab a couple of times brings you into the dialog, and then arrow keys let you select the different sounds. So for instance, col legno is with the wood. And if I play this now, it's going to sound like slapping the strings with the bow. Right? So that's what that one does. And then if I click that icon again, you can try some of the other things. And the one that I pointed out is that there's one called Espressivo that has the effect of removing that portamento stuff, which seems kind of opposite. I would have expected to get more of that with Espressivo than without. I don't make this stuff up. I'm just reporting the news. Oh, let me play just the violin. Suddenly it's clean. Right? So it's cleaner. Now, you'll find other things are about this that you don't like now when you want to slur, you're not going to get it, and the staccatos don't work right, and so there's some issues, and hopefully people file GitHub issues so they can get fixed. But at least now there's a way of selecting all these things. Sol Ponticello, where you do it by the bridge, right? It's hard. I know it's hard to hear. And it's supposed to be quiet because that sound is a very quiet sound, but that's where you're bowing basically. You're bowing. Wait a minute, is that bowing behind the bridge or is that bowing with the wood? Now I can't remember my my string technique stuff, but you'll see all these other ones, sol tasto and Bartok pizzicato, all these different sounds that are available for violin. Well, all of the different Muse sounds, or at least most of them, have something like that available. So for instance, if I enter some trumpet notes, and play the trumpet, you get the regular trumpet sound. But if I add myself one of those sound flags, you'll see there's now a couple new options, or several new options. So the shake option is one that's better for me to put a whole note on. And let me do that with a whole note so we can hear the shake. This is the one I demonstrated last week or a couple weeks ago, whenever it was. Right, that is a shake. It's classic kind of a jazz technique. And so there's a few other things of note here. I'm going to delete that. Well, I'm going to change that whole note into it's playing them back, right? That's kind of interesting to hear. I mean, it's correct. It's just interesting to hear it play the shakes as I enter the notes. Might be better if it didn't, but whatever. I'm going to take that phrase and I'm going to eliminate those things and just listen to the eighth notes as they are. And this is the one I tried to demonstrate last time, and I'm not going to succeed this time either, but so the question is, should those notes be tongued or should they be slurred? And the answer depends very much on context. A lot of pieces, like lead sheets, for instance, don't put in slur markings anywhere. It's just assumed the player is going to figure out their own slurring. You will also see that very often for strings in particular in orchestral music, because it's assumed the section leader is going to write in the bowings for everyone, right? So there are many cases where music might be written with no slur markings, but it's expected people slur it anyhow. So the default playback in MuseScore with Muse Sounds has always been kind of a very, very light tongue, closer to slurring. But now it gives you some options by these sound flags. So if I go back to my sound flag thing, you'll see there is a non-legato option. Where each note is clearly tongued. It's no longer trying to split the difference. There's also an option that says classic phrasing. I'm going to turn off the, oh, wait a minute. That's interesting. Now the non-legato option has disappeared, but if I set this back to ordinary, oh, maybe that's only available in standard? Oh, okay, I guess only standard phrasing has the non-legato option. So this is still a work in progress for me understanding it, and you all can be playing around with this also. But let's listen to this. So this should sound exactly like the default. A very light tongue. If I change this to classic phrasing, it's also the light tongue. But if I put in slur markings now, it might play them. This, in my experience, seems to depend on tempo and other things, but let's check this out. Oops. I want to just play the trumpet staff. Okay, it's subtle, and it's probably not coming through the internet very well, but you'll have to trust me that I could hear the difference there. I don't totally trust that. Yeah, it's subtle, but it's there. If I try to slow it down, unfortunately, the effect kind of goes away, but I'm going to try it anyhow. I'm going to slow it down to 60 and see if we can tell any better. So I don't know if you could tell, but there is definitely a subtle difference between the slurless notes and the slurred notes. So when you put classic phrasing on, it seems like that is its effect. I mean, this stuff isn't really documented. I'm gonna write up lessons for it based on what we're able to figure out. But this basically, when you select the classic phrasing option, it makes the notes more cleanly articulated by default, and then the slurs then actually become more noticeable. And then clarinet So brass instruments in general have that. The woodwinds don't have that option, I don't think. And so I'm going to delete this thing here and add, I copied it and it tried to copy that. All right. If I add a sound flag to clarinet, you'll see there's only a couple of options. It doesn't have that classic phrasing option. It just has a with vibrato option. And so let's delete that guy. Oh, I guess you can delete the sound flag independently from deleting the text. I didn't know that was a thing. But now I'll put that one here, and let's hear the difference between normal and with vibrato. So I heard a little bit of effect of that slur, maybe, or maybe I'm imagining it. So the vibrato, I think, is going to make a bigger difference on long notes. Let's try a long note. And hear it with and without vibrato. Yeah, I'm not really hearing the vibrato, but let's turn that to ordinary. Yeah, I'm not hearing a big difference with the vibrato, so I'm not sure about that one. But check out the singing version. This is the sound you get if you play a wind instrument and vocalize, basically use your vocal cords while you're playing. It's not a common technique, but it's a technique that every once in a while you might see someone want to use, and there it is. It's sampled in there. It's more common actually for flute, and it sounds kind of cool for flute, but you'll see, like, Jethro Tull and Ross on Roland Kirk, people in the jazz and pop tradition, using that vocalizing while playing the flute. But also modern classical music for flute likes to use that because it's easier to do on flute than it is on a reed instrument to make that happen. So anyhow, these sound flags are different sounds available. I also put in a choir. I'll take this one down an octave. For choir, if I play this line right now, I guess I should have had this down an octave. I'm doing it in this octave because the vowel sounds are a little more clear, and the choir sounds are, we all have probably noticed they're quieter than other instruments for no obvious good reasons. I'm just turning it up in the mixer. Those are ahs. If I now add myself a sound flag, you'll see there are oohs. Let's hear the oohs. Might be more of an O than an oo. Not really. Yes, might be more of an O sound, but it's different than the ah sound. And here's a more of a sound. Right? So you get different sounds available for that also. And apparently there's a non-vibrato option also, which I haven't tried, but let's try it with the ahs. What's interesting to me is I don't notice a difference in the vibrato, but I heard a different attack, right? It was a stronger attack, almost like it was a consonant at the beginning, like da, da, da. It wasn't really a consonant, but it was a breath accent on it. So that's going to actually be perhaps useful. And yes, Chris, sound flags don't appear in printed parts at all. The sound flags are just on-screen things, just like the dotted line around the frame is, or the system break icon. In fact, if you have nothing selected in your score and look at the properties panel, there is the ability to turn off formatting. And so if I turn off the display of formatting, there goes that system break. If I turn off frames, there goes that dotted line. And if I turn off sound flags, there go those sound flags. None of those things appear in print. None of them appear in PDF. None of them appear when you upload to MuseScore.com. They are just on-screen things to help you out when you're editing the score, so you have something to click. Organ registration. So the thing is, there is no organ in Muse Sounds other than a Hammond, but I haven't tried it. Let's find out. I haven't tried an organ, but let's add an organ. And interesting. Oh yeah, it's 3 staves, and so it's kind of stretched across all of that. And I have to go to the mixer and change from MS Basic to the actual organ sound in here, the Hammond organ sound. And so now here's the Hammond organ sound. I'm realizing I'm getting stuttering because I just rebooted this morning and I forgot to set my sample rate. So those of you who recognize that stuttering sound and say, hey, I hear that, how do you make it go away? It's usually about the sample rate on your system not being set the way it would need to be. It's supposed to all happen automatically, but sometimes it doesn't. And so if yours is set to 48,000, changing it to 44.1 does the job. So on Windows, you do it by right-clicking your speaker icon and then going into the settings for your speaker is where you would set it to 44.1 kilohertz. But in any case, all right, so let's hear that again now without the stutter. And it's still stuttering a little, but that's just because I'm streaming, and streaming always messes up my system a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to see, are there sound flags available? Vibrato on, vibrato off. I guess that's about it. So if I do this, well, that's it. That definitely turned vibrato off. That's very clear. So that's about the only thing available right now is the Hammond organ has vibrato on or off. Piano has like a studio piano, which is more like an upright, and then one that they call orchestral, which sounds ridiculous to me. So the normal piano sounds fine. It's normal. If I try to go here and go here, you'll see the studio. Oh, the studio is the normal one. Pop piano is the other one. It's just a brighter piano. It's like sampled from a Yamaha instead of a Steinway, probably. The orchestral one, I don't know what they're thinking here, but here's the orchestral piano. Same thing, but with reverb is basically how I interpret that. All right, so you can play around with sound flags and check out your favorite instruments and see what sounds are available, see what bugs you discover, because certain things haven't been tested enough yet because this is all brand new, and lots of things to play with here. There are a couple other things I wanted to show. So in these last few minutes here, I want to show you the other things that I wanted to show that aren't so much about MuseScore Studio itself, but are kind of connected. So one of them requires me to come over. Actually, I'll do this one last because then I can turn off my screen share. So one moment. I want to show you something about the website. So if I come over to MuseScore.com, yeah, that's not MuseScore.com, but it will be in a second. I will go to MuseScore.com. There's a couple of things that I want to show you here about MuseScore.com. So one of them is if I view one of my scores, this one here, imitation canon in 3 or more parts, right? This is part of the counterpoint course. If I go to the ... menu here, there's a C version history. And this shows that I've put up 2 different versions. One that I uploaded August 30th, doesn't tell me what year. Well, that's useful. But before that, I had uploaded one on June 16th. So it shows me the history of these, and there's a make current button so that you can make one of them current, or you can just download that version and restore an older version. So for instance, if I put in Reunion, the piece we were listening to a minute ago, I know I've updated that 100 times. Well, not 100 times, but I originally did that in MuseScore 1.1. And check this out. I go to see version history, and it shows me a whole lot of these versions. I mean, I have no idea, is this one really the original version? Because it's not telling me the year. That's silly. So it's probably not keeping every version back, because I uploaded that thing in like 2012 or something originally, or what does it say? Maybe it was 2011. It's a long time ago. 2012, February 18th, 2012. All right, that's when I originally uploaded it. What does the version history say? February 18th, right there. So these were the first several versions I did, all in MuseScore 1. And then I must have uploaded a MuseScore 2 version, a MuseScore 3 version, and now a MuseScore 4 version. I thought I had uploaded more versions than that, but apparently that was it. So there you go. Even though this version history feature didn't exist, behind the scenes, it was keeping all those versions. It just didn't have a way of presenting them. Now it does. So that's kind of cool. So that's a cool thing to know about. The other new thing that I've never seen before, never heard of before until I saw Bradley being the head of the MuseScore Studio project right now, Bradley Kunda. His video that he just posted to YouTube under the MuseScore channel points out this invite to view button. So this was, while looking at a score, I clicked the share button and then invite to view. And this just basically sends a message to another user. Either put in their username from MuseScore.com or an email address, and it will send an email to them inviting them to view the score. Now, you might wonder, well, why is that good? I could just email them individually. The cool thing here is that this works even with private scores, which normally there's no way to do, right? There's secret links that work with unlisted scores, but for private scores, there's usually no way for anyone else to view them. But apparently, if you invite them specifically with here, this way, it will allow people to view even your private scores or unlisted scores. So you don't have to, use that secret link business. The secret link is still good for posting to websites, because this will only give that person access. And I don't know how it does it. I have no idea how this works. I haven't used it, but it must generate a special extra secret link that you can use. So someone else can try it and let me know how it works. But in any case, that's a new thing about MuseScore.com. So the last thing that I wanted to show you, let me just make sure there wasn't something else on MuseScore.com, because I sort of feel like there was. Version history, invite to view. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you, I'm going to kill my screen share for. Actually, I don't even need to kill it. Actually, I just need to open up a camera so that you can see me bigger. So give me a moment here to bring up my camera app. No, so it says you can send them an email. So maybe they don't have to have an account on MuseScore, but I haven't tried it. So I would say give it a shot. All right, I want to show you now, and again, I'm going to get this guy a little smaller so I can see my chat, but big enough that you can see my screen. Yeah, and I agree, Chris, that the Espressivo seems like it should be the default, but it hasn't been tested much yet. And so like things like the fact that right now it doesn't honor slurs at all, and the fact that it doesn't seem to honor articulation markings well, it's got some limitations. So there's probably reasons why it's not the default yet, but maybe eventually it will be. We'll see. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the MuseScore app here. So this is the MuseScore app. Is it looking backwards to you, or does it look correct? Y'all tell me. Is everything backwards, or is it reading correctly? And yes, it's totally free to have an account. The trick is, don't get tricked into signing up for a trial of anything. Just go to MuseScore.com and click the login button. Don't click any start free trial buttons. Just click the login button, and then on the login screen there'll be a create an account link. Click that. Don't get fooled into any trials or anything. Just log in, create an account. All right, so you say that was backwards, so I click this. Oh, that is not what I wanted at all. It's this one. How about this? Better? Yeah. All right. So this is the app. So the new thing it has is now it can finally display MuseScore 4 scores, like this one I created just a week ago as a demo for the Counterpoint course. So it's MuseScore 4 has been out for almost a year and a half, and they're only just now getting it supported in the mobile app. So hard to be too excited for that, but yeah, no, it's a big deal, right? Because now finally the mobile app has a purpose again. Went a year and a half without having much of a purpose, but it also has a fairly cool new feature. And so I'm going to finish out here by telling you a little bit of background. So when MuseScore first created their mobile apps, it didn't actually render your score. It didn't like display your score new. It just generated a PDF behind the scenes and showed you a PDF. So all it was a fancy PDF viewer. So you couldn't do fancy things like change the font size of the score or anything. You could make the whole PDF bigger, but then you couldn't see it all at once, right? It didn't do what you expect if you change the font size. Right around the time when MuseScore 3 came out, which is right around the same time when, if you remember, Ultimate Guitar was the company that kind of acquired MuseScore back 6 years ago now, 6 or 7 years ago. It's been a while. And that was right before MuseScore 3 came out. They as part of the deal where Ultimate Guitar got involved with MuseScore, part of what made that happen was they had created their own version of a web viewer for MuseScore files that did allow resizing and things like that. And so they incorporated that into the mobile app, but it wasn't real MuseScore. So it would look different than it looked in MuseScore. You could resize things, but things looked not quite right. So for quite a long time, your score just didn't look right on the mobile device. You could resize things and it was great, but they didn't look very good. Well, I'm not going to claim it's perfect now, but if I resize this score now, watch what happens. I'm going to make it bigger, 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 bigger. And as I make it bigger, now there's only 2 bars per system, but it's all displayed correctly. It's displaying correctly. And that wasn't really the case before. It would let you do it, but it just didn't do a very good job of it. Let's take a look at my oh, this is interesting. This is my Canon worksheet that we were just looking at. And so the text is huge, the music is tiny. So, that's weird. But what happens if I try zooming in? Now, the text is the same size, but the music's bigger. So in any case, it's it's better than it was before. So that's what's going on. And yeah, thanks for the comments about the studio itself. I've done some work setting this up. I created my little background. If you can't tell, that's a painting of me a friend of mine did. Me and a bass player, Larry Henley, in the background, and a plant and some books, just to have a nice looking background. I don't love that I have to have this screen here blocking the window, but otherwise you get all this annoying window light. So anyhow, that's what's new these days. There's some new stuff coming in the community. Also, new feature just launched yesterday. It's going to allow me to organize some of the spaces better. It's going to make it easier to find the assignments within the courses. So I will be putting all that into play over the next few days. But that's my story. So that all said, let's wrap things up by hearing our theme music here. And yeah, the screen looks okay, but the the light behind it doesn't. I might just put up some soundproofing curtains, and maybe that'll make me happier. So again, this has been what's new in the world of MuseScore here, MuseScore Studio. 4.3 is the version now, and so you download the update. The one important piece of information I didn't share that I need to caveat is not every time, but this version, MuseScore 4.3, they have bumped the file version number. So if you save a score in 4.3, it won't open in 4.2. There's a hack that'll let that happen. I'll try to make that next week's tip because there's not a great reason why 4.2 can't open 4.3 scores. There's a couple changes in how tremolo work and a couple other things that they were worried, well, if you use that feature, then older versions might screw up. But most scores will open up just fine. So I'll show you how to hack around it. But good to know that people like the screen, so good to know. So yeah, the version number has changed. So if you do save a score in 4.3, it won't open in 4.2 without the hack. But you know, you hopefully won't need to. So anyhow, thanks everyone for being here. Tomorrow, Music Masterclass, we'll be looking at cannons. Should be fun. See you tomorrow, or see you whenever I see you. Bye.